So yesterday, House Republicans released the transcript of the closed-door testimony of Hunter Biden's business associate, Devon Archer. And for the days leading up to this testimony and then the days after, Republicans have been desperate to spin this as proof that President Joe Biden behaved corruptly and corruptly entangled himself in Hunter Biden's business. But if you actually look at the transcript, and we're gonna, there's actually evidence to the contrary. Most of the testimony in this transcript actually disproves or contradicts what the Republicans are so desperate to spin, because Devon Archer, the Republican star witness, says a number of times that to his knowledge, Joe Biden had nothing to do with Hunter Biden's business. But before we unpack all this, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. So folks, I didn't want to do this, but I figure it's necessary. Okay, as a reminder, Hunter Biden has never had a position in the Biden or Obama White Houses. He has never been a government employee. He is a private citizen, very troubled, someone who has broken the law, someone who's being prosecuted for his violations of the law with respect to tax law and a possession of a gun unlawfully. He's being prosecuted for that. But this man has been scrutinized at least 4 times by federal authorities in the executive branch and by Republicans in Congress. It's absurd. So Republicans have been desperate to use him as a political cudgel against his father. And the only reason that we're talking about this, two reasons. Number one, unfortunately, to a lot of people, this is really persuasive. To a lot of people, there's some sort of sinister relationship between Hunter and Joe, and they create this false equivalence between Hunter and Joe Biden. Hunter Biden, then a false equivalence with Joe Biden, because apparently anything Hunter does is a reflection of Joe. And then between Joe Biden and Trump, Republicans are desperate to muddy the waters and make it seem like Joe Biden is not ethically and morally superior to Donald Trump, which of course he is. But the second thing, the other reason that we're covering this, is because this is actually damning. This disproves, this torpedoes the Republican Party's desperate attempts to spin the testimony. So that's why we're going to go through it. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm going to try to be concise. We're not going to go through the full 141-page document, obviously. That's how long this testimony is. But I did take about 20-something, maybe 30 screenshots, which I want to go through with you. I'll try to be quick, but I want to make this point. Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's associate, the man in this testimony, repeatedly says things that torpedo Republican claims. So we're going to start with this one. So at one point, this is in chronological order in the testimony, Devon Archer is asked, why would Hunter Biden, in his private business, get credit for Joe Biden going to Ukraine? What kind of credit was he trying to get? And Devon Archer says, I think it's clear he's not bringing his dad, but he's saying, I'm going to get credit for it. And then when he's asked, when you say get credit, Devon Archer says he was not determining, he wasn't setting his dad's schedule to bring him to Ukraine, I don't think. Meaning that Hunter Biden was trying to take credit for independent political decisions made by his father. Later on, because you'll see Republicans talk about, well, Devon Archer says that the brand that Hunter Biden was trying to sell was Joe Biden. Even if we accept that claim at face value, that's not a crime of Joe Biden. If you have a son, if you're a politically powerful person and your son tries to weaponize your name, it's only bad for you legally if you help him do it. Otherwise, it's just classic nepotism, and that's certainly not a crime, and I would argue certainly not an indictable offense or an impeachable offense. So Devon Archer's asked, you keep saying the brand, but by brand, you mean the Biden family, correct? Devon Archer says yes. And that brand, in your opinion, was the majority of the value delivered from Hunter Biden to Burisma. Devon Archer says, I wouldn't say the majority. I wouldn't speculate on percentages, but I do think that was an element of it, basically the Biden last name. And then when they ask, okay, when you say the Biden family, you clearly mean Joe Biden, right? And Devon Archer said, yeah, that's fair to say. Listen, I don't think it's just Joe directly, but it's fair to say that brought the most value to the brand. So Hunter Biden having a powerful last name and Joe Biden being the most powerful member of the Biden family, that was part of Hunter Biden's value to the company. But again, that's not a crime. That's only a crime if Joe is engaging in illegal or corrupt acts to help Hunter Biden empower the brand. So later on, they ask, they talk about the pressure that Burisma, the company in Ukraine, Ukrainian energy company that Hunter and Devon Archer worked for, and they said, listen, there was a bunch of pressure from various governments, including in the United Kingdom. That was the sort of pressure that Burisma was under because they were suspected of corrupt activity. And they said that during the conversation that Burisma executives asked Hunter Biden to make a call to help deal with this government pressure. And Devon Archer says the request, basically the request is like, can Washington, D.C. help? But it wasn't like they were specific, can the big guy help? It was always, can we get help in D.C.? And so he's asked, when you say D.C. help, could they use some D.C. help? What did you interpret this to mean? And Devon Archer says, well, I'm still learning about it, but it seems like at the end of the day, lobbying, soft lobbying, firm lobbying. I mean, there was constant pressure on them, and there were various service providers hired and people working on, help in D.C. A lot of power is obviously flexed there. Of course, it's the nation's capital. So that was a constant, whether it was putting out fires or helping expand. Again, nothing against Joe Biden. And so then they ask about Hunter Biden's expertise. Why was he hired by Burisma? Devon Archer said, well, he was a lobbyist and an expert, and obviously he carried a very powerful name. So I think that's what they were asking for. There was also a lobbying firm, Blue Star Strategies, that had to be hired. It was a high-pressure environment. There were constant requests for help. So again, he is asked, what did Hunter Biden do after he was given the request to call D.C.? Devon Archer says, I didn't hear this phone call, but he called his dad, Joe Biden. Okay, well, that seems bad. But he's asked, how do you know that? Well, because Vadim, who is a Burisma executive, a third party, told Devon Archer that Hunter Biden called his dad. So we're talking about a chain of influence here. Devon Archer did not hear this phone call directly and cannot independently confirm that Hunter Biden called Joe Biden to get help in dealing with pressure against the company for which he worked. But there's even more to undermine this in just a second. What did Vadim tell you about the call? Just that we called D.C. So Joe Biden's not even named. Devon Archer says that he was told, Hunter Biden was told to call D.C., not his father. But wait, there's more. They asked him again, he expressly told you he called his father or that he called Washington, D.C.? Devon Archer says D.C. So again, to be clear, Devon Archer has no evidence whatsoever that Hunter Biden ever made direct requests of his father to intervene in Hunter Biden's business. This is crucial. But wait, there's more. We're only like 8 screenshots in, so let's keep going. Let's see here. All right, so just to clarify, before Hunter Biden made a phone call, there was a reference to making a call in Washington, D.C. Devon Archer says correct. And afterwards, this third person told you that they had called Washington, D.C. Devon Archer says correct. You did not hear the phone call. I did not hear the phone call. Did anyone ever tell you that call was to Vice President Biden? No, they did not tell me that. So you don't know one way or another if it was to Vice President Biden. I do not know one way or another if it was to him. D.C. Okay? That is incredibly important. So again, you're going to hear various claims along the way. How many times about the number of times that Hunter Biden and his father spoke on speakerphone when other people were around? The figure that's thrown around is 20 times over 10 years. So 2 times per year that this happened. Really small number. And more importantly, there was nothing of substance discussed. How many times would you say Hunter Biden put his father on speakerphone or referenced his father being on the phone in front of others who are either foreign investors or foreign nationals? Approximately, the differentiation between investor and normal day, it's a hard thing to speculate on. They spoke every day. Hunter and Joe Biden spoke every day. He acknowledged that they spoke every day. And, he would sometimes make it apparent he spoke to his dad and sometimes put him on speaker. As far as quantifying the number, I don't know. In my 10 years, in my whole partnership, which was 10 years, maybe 20 times, so 2 times per year. And during those 20 times, did Hunter Biden ever place his dad on speakerphone? Yes. But again, they didn't talk anything of substance. And we'll revisit that in a second. Again, this is in chronological order in the transcript. So, again, there's a reference to the brand, and we talked about this earlier. Republicans are really focusing on this. They're saying, listen, Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's associate, says that the brand that Hunter Biden was selling was Joe Biden, but that's not quite accurate. So this is part of the testimony. Mr. Biggs, Andy Biggs, a Republican questioner, says, but they weren't the brand, referring to a PR firm hired in D.C., Blue Star Strategies. They weren't the brand. Blue Star wasn't the brand. Devon Archer says they were not the brand. Then Biggs says the brand was really Joe Biden. Devon Archer clarifies, the United States, D.C. was the brand. D.C. was the brand. Andy Biggs, you can tell he's probably his sphincter clenched. Wait a minute, D.C. But earlier in your response to me, you said it was really Biden, the Biden family. And then we got to it wasn't anybody else but Joe Biden. Devon Archer says in the context of the Biden family. So if you're following, the brand that Hunter Biden was pitching to his bosses at Burisma, this is what you get out of me, this is the value, is the brand, the D.C. brand. Washington, D.C., the center of power of American politics. The fact that Hunter Biden was a lobbyist, a lawyer, he had a powerful last name. He knew PR firms and lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. That was the brand that Hunter Biden offered this Ukrainian energy company, his connections, okay? And then of that subset, he was cashing in on his father's name. I'm a Biden. My dad is the vice president. Clearly, I'm well connected. The brand is not, as Republicans say, Joe Biden. That is a very reductive view, clearly contradicted by the transcript, okay? Joe Biden's connection to Hunter Biden, their relationship as father and son, was one component of the value that Hunter Biden tried to sell to Burisma. One value. And again, while that might be scummy, while that might be privileged, while that might be nepotistic, that doesn't say anything about Joe Biden. There's nothing illegal there. The only corrupt act would be as if Joe Biden, as vice president, was working with Hunter to do such things, to influence U.S. foreign policy on behalf of his son's business, for which there is no evidence. Let's get that clear. But let's continue. So eventually he's asked, okay, is it your understanding that Hunter Biden felt it was important that his role in Burisma comply with U.S. laws? Devon Archer says he did. I would speculate that he would think that, yes. Based on your interactions with him, the fact that they were friends and business associates, based on interactions, I don't think he was looking to break any laws. And then Dan Goldman, the Democratic congressman, says, well, does this refresh your recollection, this email, as to whether or not you heard him say to you in either writing or verbally, you look at this document, and they're referencing a document here. Again, in the context of, did Hunter Biden feel it was important to comply with U.S. laws? Devon Archer says, yeah, he was very cognizant of his name and his brand, and he would talk about it. But this doesn't talk about the name and the brand. It just talks about making sure that Burisma understands the scope of what he can and cannot do, and he cannot intervene directly with domestic policymakers and needs to abide by FARA, which is the Foreign Agent Relationship Act, if I remember correctly. Basically, if you are lobbying directly, if you have that sort of relationship, you would need to register as a foreign agent. And on any other U.S. laws in the strictest sense of the board. Was that your understanding of both his approach and Burisma's understanding as well? This is what Devon Archer says. I would say yes to the first part of the question. The first part of the statement, yes. But I think Burisma was constantly looking for more. But again, that has nothing to do with Joe Biden. If Hunter Biden's employers were wanting more out of him, if they really wanted Hunter Biden to try to lean on his father, to use his father's influence to benefit them, that's not Joe Biden's fault. It only becomes Joe Biden's fault if Joe Biden actually did it, again, for which there's no evidence. And then Devon Archer goes on to say it kind of speaks to the little bit to the other email that we used as an exhibit earlier, where it's like, we're going to use my dad's thing and take credit for it. There was an element that he was always trying to avoid that, but at the same time trying to prove value. So it was this element of like signals. So your reference to the name and brand, what you mean is he had to be scrupulous about not violating the law. Right. That's why I refer to the brand. So again, Devon Archer says Hunter Biden was scrupulous about avoiding violating the law. So again, this keeps going. I would probably beat this to a dead horse if we wanted to. So is your understanding he was even more fastidious about following the law? Right, because the name and the brand. Basically, Hunter Biden, knowing that his father was the vice president and having a powerful last name, he knew he had to be even more scrupulous about the law. And that's according to the Republican witness, Devon Archer. Let's see here. But again, and this is another part of the transcript of like, but Burisma obviously wanted more out of him. And Devin Archer says yes, but again, as far as he knows, Hunter Biden never gave them more, okay? Let's see. And again, this is another part of the transcript where when Devin Archer is referencing D.C., the help they get from D.C., is it fair to say there was a whole D.C. team that handled public affairs on behalf of Burisma? Yes. And that D.C. was firms like Boyce Schiller, Blue Star Group, this lobbyist who was brought in to do the Department of Homeland Security issue. Is that fair? Fair. That's not Joe Biden. No, that's not. That's the D.C. team. You mean Joe Biden is not the D.C. team? Right. So again, Archer is confirming a separation between then Vice President Biden and D.C. that Burisma would constantly reach out to for help. They employed PR firms and lobbying groups in Washington, D.C. to do business, which is perfectly legal. That is not Joe Biden. Let's see. So this is a big one. And again, I know this may end up being like 25 minutes at the end of it, and I apologize if so. But again, my point in doing this is just to illustrate that if you or anyone you know have questions, maybe like you're on the fence about the relationship between Joe and Hunter Biden with respect to business, maybe you can refer to this video because we've got the text right here. So I wanted to put some time into this. So the final screenshots are with when the Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman gets to have his questions. Okay, so he asks a lot of very important exculpatory questions. So he basically says this, listen, Republicans in the Senate investigated Hunter and Joe Biden and their relationship with Burisma and Ukraine and things like that back in 2020. And this is what the report finalized at the end of it. He is reading this. Dan Goldman is reading this to Devin Archer, the Republican witness. Let me read to you the conclusions of a previous investigation, okay? So he reads this to Archer. Every witness interviewed for this investigation testified that Joe Biden did not alter U.S. foreign policy to benefit his son, Hunter Biden, and that Hunter Biden's presence on the board of Burisma had no effect on U.S. foreign policy. Every witness stated that Hunter Biden and his associates had no role in the formulation of U.S. policy, and Hunter Biden's role did not influence U.S. foreign policy decisions, and that Vice President Biden carried out U.S. foreign policy in the interest of the United States. The investigation's evidence set forth in this report confirms there was no corruption, wrongdoing, or impropriety on the part of Vice President Biden. And then he says, having read that for you, Devin Archer, the Republican witness, I have a few questions for you based on your own knowledge and experience. Based on your own knowledge and experience, your relationship with Hunter Biden, your time on Burisma's board, and the entirety of your knowledge and experience, do you have any basis to disagree with the conclusion that, quote, Vice President Joe Biden did not alter U.S. foreign policy to benefit his son, Hunter Biden? Devin Archer says this, I have no basis to know if he altered. I have no basis to know if he altered policy to benefit his son. So you have no knowledge. I have no knowledge. Sorry. That is incredibly important. Republicans will not talk to you about it. But wait, there's more. Again, he reiterates, I have no knowledge of him altering U.S. policy to benefit his son. Do you have any basis to disagree with the conclusion that Hunter Biden's presence on on Burisma's board had no effect on U.S. foreign policy? Devin Archer says, not directly. You mean like making laws? I don't think so. Dan Goldman, the Democratic questioner, says foreign policy. Devin Archer also clarifies, no, not on foreign policy. No basis to disagree with that conclusion. No, says Devin Archer. Do you have any basis to disagree with the conclusion Hunter Biden's role did not influence U.S. foreign policy decisions? Devin Archer, the Republican witness, says, I have no basis. There you go. Another one. Do you have any basis to disagree with the conclusion that Vice President Biden carried out U.S. foreign policy in the interests of the United States? I have no basis to judge, said Devin Archer. And then he's asked to clarify or to disagree with that or disagree. You have no knowledge, nothing based on your knowledge or experience which contradicts this conclusion. No, is what he says. So, let's see here. Because again, we've got, oh my God, still got 10 more. So maybe, let me just say here. Okay, the Republicans will also make hay out of this. They'll say, listen, Devin Archer also said during this testimony that he felt that Burisma, the energy company that he and Hunter Biden worked for, would have gone out of business, okay, if it didn't have the brand attached to it. But again, as we clarified, The brand is not directly Joe Biden. The Biden last name was merely a component of the brand, Devin Archer said Hunter Biden offered to Burisma. Okay. So the report also found, quote, no evidence that any action of U.S. government official or any U.S. official was taken to benefit Burisma or Hunter Biden. Do you have any evidence or knowledge that contradict this conclusion? No, Devin Archer says. So based on everything you saw, heard, and observed, did you have any knowledge of Joe Biden having any involvement with Burisma? No, not direct, no. No involvement of Joe? No. Okay. And then he says, no, my only thought is that I think Burisma would have gone out of business if it didn't have the brand attached to it. That's like my only opinion. But I have no basis or never heard any conversations. And then Dan Goldman, the Democratic congressman, says, okay, but that's different than Joe Biden's action. And Devin Archer says, right. Dan Goldman says, you're just talking about that Hunter was on the board. Devin Archer says, right. And I think that's why they were able to survive as long as they did. Okay. So, and then he goes on again to clarify. He's like, listen, Hunter Biden had the capabilities to navigate D.C. the way that Burisma wasn't able to, basically be in the news cycle. I think that preserved them from a longevity standpoint. And that's like what I know holistically. Okay. Then Republicans will say, but Devin Archer also testified that Burisma felt that with Hunter Biden on board, other people, other interests would be intimidated to mess with them. And this is addressing this part. Dan Goldman asks, okay, well, how would that work? And Devin Archer says, because people would be intimidated to mess with them, Burisma. Dan Goldman says, in what way? Devin Archer says, legally. Goldman says, Archer says, so this line of questioning, I have no proof. I have nothing. So what he's saying is having Hunter Biden on board, in his opinion, on Burisma, helped deter other people, in his opinion, from messing with Burisma, whatever that means. But again, as he clarifies, he has no evidence that Joe Biden, who is not Hunter Biden, did anything to intimidate other people. That's important. Republicans are going to try to confuse you. Let's see here. Ooh, this is a good one. So later on in the conversation, they talk about, man, we're 22 minutes in. I told you I try to be brief. This is a bit more, I don't know, fast and loose. But again, I think it's really, really important to have a handy reference guide when other people are like, see, Devin Archer proves that Hunter and Joe Biden. No, this debunks it. So later on in the testimony, Devin Archer, the Republican witness, Hunter Biden's former associate and friend, is asked about an FBI form that we have talked about in a previous video. You'll recall that Republicans, they released this form, which says that there was an FBI confidential source who overheard a conversation in which a Ukrainian businessman, who we later found out is Mykola Zlochevsky, the CEO of Burisma, who is referenced repeatedly in this testimony. Zlochevsky told an FBI source that he bribed Joe and Hunter Biden by paying them like $5 million apiece. So that's been all over the news cycle for the past couple of months. Now, again, the FBI source clarified in the file. He's like, listen, I have no proof that this occurred. I was just told it by a Ukrainian businessman. This is what I was told, so I felt that I need to report it. I have no evidence it happened. And Republicans have been unable to corroborate it at all. They have no financial transaction proving that Joe Biden was bribed by anyone. And by the way, Zlochevsky, the guy in question in that FBI report, or in that FBI file, would later answer an FBI questionnaire 2 years later in which he contradicts the information in that FD 1023 FBI source because he says, I never had any relationship with Joe Biden, any financial relationship with Joe Biden, nothing like that. So not only are they unverified allegations, they are actually contradicted by the alleged source of the unverified allegations. And if that wasn't enough, let's look at what Devin Archer has to say, because he's asked about it. If someone were to conclude from this that this is evidence that Joe Biden was bribed by Mykola Zlochevsky, would you disagree with that conclusion? Devin Archer. Devin Archer says, yeah, I would. And Devin Archer worked with Mykola Zlochevsky because Devin Archer and Hunter Biden were on Burisma's board. So Zlochevsky and Devin Archer, the man answering these questions, they know each other. They have a relationship. And he's saying, yeah, I know him. And I would disagree that there's any proof that Joe Biden was bribed by Mykola Zlochevsky. And then Devon Archer goes on to say, Zlochevsky and other Ukrainian businessmen exaggerate, tell fibs. Is that fair? Yep, very similar to DC operators. Yep, in Ukraine and in Russia, they brag about how much, they brag about bigger bribes than they actually give. So it's pretty kind of similar symbiosis there. So they brag, they exaggerate, they fib. And again, he knows him. Devon Archer knows Hunter Biden. He knows Mykola Zlochevsky. He knows Joe Biden. He knew Beau Biden, Hunter Biden's older brother. He had a relationship with these people. And he says, no, there's no evidence. I wouldn't believe it. So again, basically he goes on to say the last part of the testimony. We have several screenshots here in which Hunter Biden repeatedly expresses that he had no influence or no ability to influence what his father would say or do on official trips to Ukraine. Yeah, I have no basis to understand what his father and his conversations were about policy in Ukraine. But as you see, it seems pretty familiar. He can't influence it, but take credit for it. So Joe Biden would do things in Ukraine on behalf of the United States, and Hunter Biden would try to take credit for it, even though Hunter Biden made it very clear, and Devon Archer confirms, he has no evidence to believe that Hunter Biden could influence Joe. He would just take credit for it after the fact, which again, might seem scummy, might seem nepotistic, but it's not illegal. In other words, Hunter Biden would take credit for his father's actions even though he had no role or influence on those actions. He would take credit for them, Devon Archer said, despite having no role in them or influence over them. Yeah. All right. Let's see. They talked every day, Hunter and Joe Biden. In the context of these conversations, did you ever witness them discussing the substance of Hunter Biden's business? No, says Devon Archer. So is it fair to say these conversations that my Republican colleagues asked you about where Hunter Biden had Joe Biden on the phone around business partners, that there was nothing in those conversations beyond the exchange of pleasantries? That is correct. And you're not aware of Joe Biden ever doing anything to help his son's business partners? No. I think that the calls were, that's what it was. They were calls to talk about the weather and that the signal was enough to be powerful. So again, this is about projecting this illusion of access to his father. Is that correct? Correct. Is there anything else? Okay, is it still true you're not aware that Hunter Biden ever discussed policy with his father, discussed business with his father, influenced policy, American policy for the purposes of his business, or otherwise caused the vice president or asked the vice president to do anything improper, right? That's my understanding, says Devon Archer. And then we'll end on this because I thought it was a good question. I would like for you to let me ask the question, which is, would you say that Donald Trump's children benefit from their last name being Trump? Devon Archer said, I would speculate to say yes. And Dan Goldman, a Democratic congressman, says, I'll leave it at that. So again, folks, I know we're about 30 minutes in. I just wanted to cover this, and we could have gone even more in depth. There were other screenshots and excerpts, but I tried to prune it as much as possible just to reiterate the finer points. I'm not defending Hunter Biden's business ethics. It's entirely possible that he behaved unethically in the course of his work with Burisma. I am open to that, okay? I'm not going to also assert that he did either. I'm agnostic. But what I am certain of, based on this evidence, is that there's no evidence whatsoever that Joe Biden, who is the president, who is the person we should be concerned with, who is the person that we're either voting for or voting against or whatever, there's no evidence in this testimony that he ever engaged corruptly. Republicans will lie to you. They will try to spin it. But if you look at the transcript, if you look at the reporting around the transcript, you will see that it actually works against them. Their star witness here actually torpedoed their case. This is an embarrassment for the Republican Party. They should be humiliated. And if there's anybody you know in your circle, or perhaps you, who's kind of on the fence about this matter, refer to this video. We've got the transcript here. Republicans are lying to you, and they probably should give up this witch hunt, but they're not going to because they know they can't compete on policy. So they are desperate to hit Biden politically as much as they possibly can. Don't fall for it.